I built my house for $285,000, and I'm gonna break down all the costs and the whole process in this video. The first thing, of course, was getting the land. I got this lot from a wholesaler and I paid $105,000. The wholesaler made a $5,000 profit, so there wasn't any room for negotiations. Closing costs ran just over $3,000, and this lot is 100 feet wide of frontage along the road and 75 feet in depth, for a total lot size of 7,500 square feet. Since the lot had 100 feet of frontage along the road, I could subdivide it into 4 individual lots, each with 25 feet of frontage. This then broke down my land cost to $27,000 per lot. And now that I could fit 4 homes on 4 lots, I was maximizing the value of the land. And that's a great price for this location, as this lot is only 5 minutes from the Houston Medical Center and 10 minutes from downtown, the Houston Zoo, the University of Houston. So it's a very prime location, and I got it at a very cheap price. Now, a question that a lot of you probably have is, how can I fund a deal like this? So the whole time I was working on the plans and the permits and the replat, at the same time, I was talking to banks and credit unions and lenders on trying to get a new construction loan. So this was actually the hardest part, because I had no new construction experience, as this was my first deal, and most lenders didn't want to lend to me since it was my first deal and I had no experience, or they wanted me to build just 1 or 2 houses at first, have those sell, and then build the last 2, which I didn't want to do because that would take way too long and it wasn't as cost effective as building all 4 at once. I ended up going with a local small bank that was able to fund the deal, and their business lender was pretty smart because he understood that I'm really not the one building the house. The builder that I hire is really the one that needs to be experienced. So he didn't care that I had no experience. He wanted to make sure that the builder that I chose and hired, he was able to vet their experience and their track record and make sure that they were a good builder. So that made a lot more sense to me than other banks that would just ask me, how many homes have I built before? When I'm not the one actually building the houses, the builder is that I hire. And keep in mind, since I was building 4 homes, this is a business construction loan. If you're just trying to buy a piece of land and build your own individual house that you're gonna live in, there's a lot more options and a lot more flexibility to get a personal residence new construction home loan. However, since I wanted to build 4 houses, it was a different type of loan product and it had to be a business loan. Since it was my first deal working with this new bank, they would only loan up to 75% of the loan to cost of the entire project. And then I would bring 25% as a down payment. The rest of the loan terms were pretty standard. Their interest rate was the Wall Street Journal prime rate plus 1%, and they had a 1-point origination fee that they charge, which is 1% of the total loan amount. Also, the loan term was for 12 months, and I could have a 6-month extension at the end if I needed to, for free without any penalties. So I estimated the total project cost for land, soft costs, and the construction to be about $950,000 for all 4 houses. So the bank loaned 75%, or $712,500, and I had to bring 25% down, which is $237,500. So I actually used a private lender to fund $100,000 of the purchase of the land. And since he couldn't be a private lender in the sense that he would be the first position lien, as I knew I was gonna get a construction loan, I gave him a higher return than my normal 10% because he wasn't protected by the real estate in the same way of having a first position lien. Instead, I gave him a 15% annualized return on his $100,000. Now, the $45,000 of soft costs, I paid out of pocket with my own funds. All those costs are counted towards a 25% down payment with the bank. So the purchase of the land and all the soft costs was already over $150,000, so I just needed a remaining $84,000 out of pocket before the construction loan would kick in. Now, the closing costs for the construction loan ran over $14,000, but half of that was related to that 1% origination fee, or 1% of the entire loan cost, which is over $700,000. And during the whole process, I paid just under $27,000 on interest on the construction loan. And these holding costs shot up a lot because my loan was a floating rate that changes every month based on the Wall Street Journal prime rates. And if you remember, at the time, at the end of 2022, they started raising rates very quickly. So by the time I was actually having a balance on my construction loan at the end of 2022 and early 2023, the rates were at like 8 or 9% on my construction loan. So my total bank cost, which is the loan closing cost and all the interest I paid to the bank, was $41,000. So subdividing the big lot into 4 smaller lots is known as the replat. And this is part of the soft cost of new construction. Now, the soft cost is basically anything after the purchase of the land, but before the vertical construction of the project itself. So how I like to think about it in new construction, there's 3 phases: the purchase of the land, the soft costs, which is all the plans and permitting, and then the hard costs, or the vertical construction, or the actual construction of the project. Once you buy the land, the first thing you want to do is talk to an architect and get a preliminary site plan. What that is the architect will draw up a site plan of what he thinks he can fit on your lot. So for mine, he drew 4 smaller lots, all side by side with 25 feet of width. And then he sends that to the replat person, and they'll go ahead and submit a replat according to those dimensions. For the replat, I was charged $7,500, and the whole process of the replat took about 2 months. During this time, I'm still working with the architect on creating a set of custom plans that can fit on the lot and be how I want the houses to look like. And the architect charged me $8,000 for 4 sets of 1 custom floor plan. So basically, he charged me $2,000 per house for a custom set of architectural plans. But since I'm doing the same exact design on all 4 lots, the first house or first set of plans was charged more, and each duplicate plan is at half the price. These architectural plans also include the structural engineering plans as well. However, during the replat process, the city took away 10 feet of my lot from the road in order to give a sidewalk easement. So basically, if I wanted to split the lot into 4 individual lots, I had to comply with this requirement to give up 10 feet of my land to put a sidewalk there. Now, to begin with, my lot wasn't very deep. It was only 75 feet deep and 100 feet wide along the road. Now they took away 10 feet, my lot went from a 7,500 square foot lot into a 6,500 square foot lot. So I lost a lot of land in that replat process. The bigger issue is now I have less depth. The floor plan that I wanted to build originally with a first floor, kitchen, and living area couldn't work anymore. Because in this subdivision, not only am I losing 10 feet for the sidewalk, but they have a rule or a requirement for a 17-foot building setback line. What that means is you can't have any structure within 17 feet from the property line along the street. So 75 foot became 65 foot, and then I have to lose 17 feet to the building setback line. And keep in mind, I still need about 4 feet of space in the back of the property so I can fit the outdoor HVAC unit. So that dropped me down to a total of 44 feet of usable space for the design of the plans. So what I had to do is I had to move the kitchen and living area to the 2nd floor and then bring down the guest bedrooms so that downstairs has both of the guest bedrooms. This way, the architect was still able to create a very efficient floor plan that was 1,480 square feet, but it still had 3 bedrooms and 2.5 bathrooms and was still only 2 stories. The reason that I didn't want a 3-story home was because 1, I was gonna be living in one of these houses and I hate stairs, and 2, it's gonna cost more and take longer to build a 3-story home because you have to get scaffolding at such a high height, and all those items just cost more and it takes more time. Another issue with the smaller lot size is now that my impervious coverage of the lot exceeded the 65% limit set by the city of Houston. Now what that means is the city of Houston has a rule where if over 65% of the lot is going to be covered in concrete, then you need to add in stormwater, drainage, and retention plans. So impervious coverage means coverage that can't be penetrated by rainwater, which is concrete. So that counts the foundation of the homes and the driveways as impervious coverage. So now that my lot was so small, the foundation of the 4 homes basically was the entire width and length of the lot if you add in the driveway as well. So in order to prevent flooding and to have proper drainage, the city of Houston requires you to add drainage when your impervious coverage is over 65% of the total lot size. So I had to pay a civil engineer $4,800 for a set of stormwater retention plans, and the civil engineer required a topographic survey of the elevation of the lot, so I had to pay a surveyor another $700 for the topographic survey. Meanwhile, when all this was going on, at the same time I was working on a soil report. What that is I pay an engineer to come out and they will drill and dig holes and take out samples of the dirt at different depths at different parts of the lot to determine the type of soil there is. And using this soil report, you can send it to the structural engineer so he knows exactly what type of foundation will be able to work with this type of soil. Now, 99% of Houston is basically the same soil, so you're most likely gonna have a concrete foundation, either slab on grade or post-tension slab. Now, once the replat was finalized and approved by the city and recorded, and the architect had finished all the plans for the architectural and structural plans, it was time to submit the plans to the city of Houston to get them approved. And once the plans were submitted, I had to pay the impact fees. Impact fees is basically the fee you pay to connect to the city of Houston's sewer line system. And it's a flat rate that they charge per house. So since I was building 4 houses, I had to pay over $13,000. And on my block, a private developer had installed the water lines many years ago, and I had to pay the private developer a prorated portion of his expenses when he installed those lines. And that's all done through the city of Houston, so I paid just under $3,000 to be able to access and connect to the existing water lines that was installed by a private developer. So the entire soft cost process took about 4 months. That's from after I bought the lot until the plans came back from the city, stamped and approved, ready to break ground. That whole process took about 4 months. And once those plans came back approved, I had to pay $6,000 in permit fees for the final plans. So the total cost for the soft costs came to just over $45,000. So once the bank loan closes and the city approves your permits, it's finally time to start the vertical construction process. So the first step is to do dirt work to the lot. The lot was actually sitting lower than the street level, so I had to add dirt to bring it up and bring it higher to the street level so it all grades towards the street. Now another part of this is the drainage work. I had civil engineering plans requiring drainage retention pipes along the sides of the property, and that was also done as well during this process. And the dirt work cost $13,000, while the drainage retention pipes cost $15,000. Once that was complete, the concrete contractors could start doing the forms, which is the wood forms they put along the boundary of where they're gonna pour the concrete foundation. But after that, you have to call the survey company back out to do a form survey where they'll check and make sure that the forms are within the boundaries and there's no encroachment issues or alignment issues on where they're gonna pour the foundation of the house. And obviously this is important because once you pour the concrete, it's very hard to move stuff or make changes. So you want to do all these double checks before you pour the actual concrete. And the form surveys for all 4 homes cost $2,100. Once the forms are set and we know they're good, the electrician and the plumber can start running their underground piping. So for the plumber, all the drain lines are going to be underground and under the foundation. So they run those first. And then the electrician will run the undergrounds for the electrical wires to get to the house. And then all that costs just over $62,000 for all the homes. Now included in that price is the water taps and sewer taps that connect to the city water supply and the city sewer lines. That process took about 3 weeks to do all the undergrounds, and once they finished, the concrete guys were able to put in all the rebar and all the beams and supports for the foundation. And once that passed inspection with the city and with the structural engineer, we were able to pour the concrete foundation. In the concrete foundations, including the price for driveways and sidewalks, ran $87,000. Now, the sidewalks and driveways are poured later on near the end of the project, but the price is one turnkey price from the concrete subcontractor. Once the foundation was poured and completed, it's now time to start phase 2, or the framing phase. Now, framing and siding is gonna be the most expensive and the most time-consuming part of the build, as you're essentially building the entire shell of the house. But by the time I got to framing, the lumber material price had shot back up, and it was getting super expensive and way over the budget and the quote that the builder gave me initially, and that's just something you can't control because lumber prices are gonna fluctuate, and you can either pause and put the project on hold and wait, or you just go through with it and just get the project done. And that's what I decided to do, to just keep building. I knew that I got the land cheap enough, so overruns and surprises like this with the lumber price shooting up, I was able to swallow the cost. Even though I didn't like it, I had to get the project done. Now the framing labor, the contractor charged me $45,000, but the material with the lumber is what killed me. I paid over $72,000 just for the framing material alone. In the original quote from the builder, it was estimated to be about $50,000 for the lumber package, and I ended up spending $72,000. So that's an extra $22,000, which is a huge 50% increase almost on the original bid. That lumber material price was so high because it's just the lumber, just the 2x4s, the trusses, and the wood decking for the roof. The hardy siding material was not included in that price. The hardy siding material ran a little higher as well because I have 12-foot ceilings on the second floor, so that needs more material. So the material cost alone for the hardy siding was just under $70,000. So the lumber material and the hardy siding material was my biggest expense, as both of those combined came to almost $150,000. The windows were actually pretty cheap. I got all the windows for just over $10,000, and a lot of them were custom 8-foot tall windows as well. And the wholesale supplier that I got it from, they actually raised the prices about 6 months after I bought the windows, and now it's like double the price. So I got a really good deal before the prices shot up on the windows. The framing and siding took the longest, and timeline-wise, it took them 2 months to finish it, as there were some small delays here and there, but it was also the bulk of the work, is framing, siding, etc. And once they were done, the roofers could come in and knock out the roofs, all 4 roofs in 1 or 2 days. And the roofer charged me $13,300 for all 4 roofs, or around $3,300 per roof. Now that the exterior of the house was complete and the house was dried in, it's now time to start the interior work of the house. The next step after the whole exterior is completed is all the rough-ins for your mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So for HVAC, I got a turnkey price of $28,800 for all the homes, and that's turnkey. That includes the units, the condenser, the indoor unit, all the duct work, all the trim, the grills, thermostat, all the vents in the bathrooms, and then connecting the vent over the kitchen stove. Now for plumbing, I got the same exact price, $28,800, and that's all the rough-in, labor, material, and then to do all the trim out and pass all the permits, etc. But I have to buy my own finishes. So my own faucets, tub, shower fixtures, garbage disposal, etc. I have to buy the actual finish items, but they will install them. Now the electrical was higher, it was $37,000, but it's the same deal as plumbing. All the rough-in, labor, material is included, and then on the trim out and the finishes, they will include small stuff like switches and outlet plugs, etc., and the recessed lights and smoke detectors, but I had to pick out my own ceiling fans, my own chandelier, my own pendant lights. Now, as far as pay structure goes, after rough-ins, you want to pay the contractor roughly 60% of the total job cost. So if the bid, let's say for plumbing and HVAC, was $28,800, after they finish rough-in and pass the rough-in inspections from the city, I'll pay them 60% or just over $17,000. The rest will get split up during trim out, and then after final inspection will be the last pay. And like I said, once rough-ins are done, you can do the installation. It's a fairly cheap and quick process. I paid $7,000 for the installation on all the homes, and the entire process of rough-in and installation took about 3 weeks. Once the guts of the house are in place, it's time to close up the walls and put up drywall. Now for this project, my drywall ran $34,000. And it was a little more expensive because I have 12-foot ceilings, so using more material and some more labor. And the drywall process gets it to paint ready. So that's hang, float, tape, mud, and texture of the sheetrock in this price. And that took them about 3 weeks as well. Once the sheetrock was up, I could install all the interior doors and all the trim. So that's the doors, the door trim around them, and all the closet shelving trim, and the baseboards around the house. This is a fairly quick process, and it took my guys just over a week, and the total cost came in, labor and material, just over $37,000. And at the same time that the doors and trim were being installed, I had my tile guy get started on installing the tile. That's putting up hardy backer on the shower walls, waterproofing everything, and then putting tile on the bathroom floors, the shower walls, and I did some accent wall tiling in the powder rooms as well. So all the tile work with labor and material was $51,000. Once the tile finished, it was now time for painting. So the painter came and painted inside and out, and he did a turnkey job. So labor and material, everything was included in his price, and he charged me $350 a square foot or $23,000 for both interior and exterior for all 4 homes. They finished painting the interior 100% first, and then they moved to paint the exterior, so at the same time I could have my cabinet and quartz guy come in and start working on the cabinets and quartz for the kitchen and bathrooms. So for the kitchen cabinets and for the bathroom vanity cabinets, the labor and material ran $12,600. I bought RTA, or ready to assemble cabinets, so they're already in the white color and they have soft close hinges, and all you have to do is assemble them and just install them. So it's a lot less labor and a lot quicker for my carpenter to install these cabinets. Now for the quartz counters, the other 3 houses that were the generic spec homes, it ran $13,300 labor and material. However, for my personal home, I decided to use a black quartz slab with a double waterfall, and that cost more because the black colored quartz is more expensive, and doing 2 waterfalls was a lot more labor for my contractor. And then as well, I did custom quartz sinks, and that was very expensive as well because it's all custom fabricated from a raw slab of quartz. And then finally, for my kitchen backsplash, I didn't want any lines or seams. I just wanted a smooth, clean, modern, minimal backsplash. So what he did was, my guy bought an entire slab of quartz and he custom measured out the length of the backsplash and where the vent hood was, and he did one giant cut to make one whole piece with no seams and no cuts to install it onto my backsplash. So my house alone, the labor and material for the quartz counters was almost $13,000, while the other 3 houses combined was just over $13,000. So yeah, I definitely spent a lot more on my house, but this was also a way for me to test out different designs and different styles and see what I would use for future new builds or future remodels that made sense financial-wise and what was too expensive. For example, those custom quartz sinks, while they look beautiful, they were just way too expensive and don't make sense to add for a new construction or for a flip unless you're doing something very high-end. Once the cabinets and countertops were finished, I had the electrician, the plumber, and the HVAC contractor all come back out and start trimming out. At the same time, I got my glass guy to do the mirrors and the shower doors and glass for all the houses, and that ran around $8,000. Now, a lot of small stuff I didn't count on these major line items like trash removal, deep cleanings, security cameras, security fence rentals, porta potties, all that added with the miscellaneous items like the doorknobs, cabinet pulls, mailboxes, etc. All that ran around $76,000. Basically all the stuff that don't fit in the big line items, I just threw in one category to make it easier to explain everything. As far as the garage doors, I spent $9,000 on the garage doors. And one thing to keep in mind is when I'm asking these garage door contractors for a price on garage doors, they literally take that as you literally just want the door. Like, they don't include the motor or anything like that for it to open and close. They literally just put the tracks in the door there. And you have to clarify with them that you want a turnkey install with the motor, remotes, and everything for the garage door. Otherwise, if you say you just want a garage door, they will literally just install a garage door and not have the motor or the automatic button to open it, which is of course pointless because you need the motor and two. So I learned that the hard way where I got the price, and then when they installed it, I came out to look and I was like, why doesn't the door open? Where's the motor? Where's the button, the remotes? And it said, oh, that's not included in the price of the door because you said you wanted a garage door. You have to mention specifically you want the motor and the remotes as well, which, you know, wasn't that much more. It's like a couple $100 more, but I just wish they would just do it all at one time and not have me come, find out it's not done, and have them come back out. That's just a side note, something I learned. Maybe it's different in your area, but here in Houston, multiple companies I worked with, they literally just put the door when I asked for the garage door quote. So you have to specify you want the motor, remotes, everything turnkey. So the very last thing I like to do is the flooring. I like saving the flooring for last because I don't want to put it in and then other contractors are working and they damage or dirty or destroy the floor. So I always want to do it last. So for flooring though, even though it's a brand new construction home, you want to self-level all the concrete so it's perfectly smooth and level when you put the floors. So I like to go an extra step and self-level the second floor as well, where it's just plywood, to make sure that's perfectly level and there's no uneven edges when you're walking on the floor. Now, in my experience, I would say 80 to 90% of flooring contractors don't know actually how to self-level it properly. They just put it in patches and different areas, and it never ends up being perfectly smooth. I have my go-to guy that's more expensive, but I just use them for the self-leveling so everything's perfectly flat. I went with luxury vinyl plank or LVP floors as they're the most economical and they still look good and they're more durable. The flooring ran $30,000 for all 4 houses, and that's labor and material and doing the stairs as well with stair noses and all the little transitions between the bathrooms for the tile and floor transitions. All that is a turnkey price. And at the same time, I had the landscapers on the outside doing all the landscape work. They're putting down the weed barriers, pouring the gravel, putting in the plants and the trees, etc. The landscaping with the wood fencing ran over $20,000, and I think that's a pretty good price, but there wasn't a whole lot of space for landscaping. As you remember, that the building itself took up so much of the lot that there really wasn't any much space for a yard or anything. That's why it's so much cheaper for the landscaping. Now, the holding costs for the project, like property taxes, utilities, etc., that all ran around $15,000. And finally, the builder charged me a builder fee of $20,000 per house. So that's $80,000 to the builder for managing and running the entire project. So let's recap all the costs so you can see the total project costs by each phase and line item. So first, the land was $108,258. The soft costs ran $45,076 and includes the replat, which is $7,491, the architect, which is $8,000, the civil engineering, which was $4820, the topographic survey, which is $700, the soil report, which was $2,100, and then the impact fees, which was $13,000, the water connections, which was $3,000, and the permit fees, which was $6,000. Bank loan costs and interest was $41,000. The construction cost was $917,671, and this is the line item breakdown of everything I mentioned before in the video. So you can see the dirt work, the drainage retention, the form surveys, utility undergrounds, foundation, framing, windows, siding, roof, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, insulation, sheetrock, doors and trim, tile, paint, cabinets, countertops, glass and mirrors, garage door, floors, landscaping and fencing, miscellaneous, and then holding costs and builder fees. So if you add everything up from the land purchase price, the soft costs, the bank and loan and holding costs, and the vertical construction costs, you see the grand total for this project ran $1,112,789. So as you can see, that comes out to just about $278,000 per house. But keep in mind, I spent some more money on my personal home to have some nicer finishes. So my house ended up costing more or less around $285,000, while the other 3 homes were around $275,000. So all in all, this whole project, from the day I bought the land until the day I sold all the other 3 houses and moved into my house, took 1 year and 10 months. And it took a little longer as this was my first project and there was a lot of delays that I didn't foresee, and you don't know what you don't know. So if you're trying to do the same thing or do your first new construction project, just be prepared for delays and just accept that's part of the game. And when you're first starting out, things are gonna happen. You're gonna have delays, you're gonna have cost overruns, but you just gonna learn from these mistakes, and then your next projects will get smoother and smoother. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and then like and subscribe to the channel if you want more real estate videos like this one.